Hey, Ayal. Welcome back to BRR Knowledge Center. So, in this session, we'll talk about ASP.NET Lifecycle and also, page lifecycle and application lifecycle. So, ASP.NET basically provides, two two cycles here. One is, a page lifecycle, and another one is application lifecycle, right? Or you can treat them in different way: application lifecycle and page lifecycle. So the application lifecycle has following stages actually. So I'll explain them in Notepad or Note white dashboard here. I'm just opening the Notepad here, right? Let me share. Let me increase the font for more understanding, right? So ASP.NET now life cycle or ASP.NET life cycle provides two cycles, right? That is, one is ASP.NET application lifecycle, and second one is ASP.NET page lifecycle, right? So I think you can, understood the name itself says life cycle as kind of a step series of steps which we have in ASP.NET, which ASP.NET having it when you run your ASP.NET application, right? So when you start executing or just pressing F5 of ASP.NET application, it basically creates two life cycles. One is application side life cycle, and another one is page life cycle. Let us see application life cycle, right? So far we have seen kind of controls and methods how we are doing it, adding it, and running and reflecting on UI. Now we'll see how they're rendering and coming onto UI at browser side. So users makes a request for accessing application, right? So like in the page, browser send this request to the web server. So when I look at the this is client, I can say this is browser, right? He is going to send, he is going to make a request, right? Make request for a page, right? Then this request is sending to right, sends this request to web server, right? So this is where web server means IAS, right? So, and when this request is sending to the web server, this ASPX page, in example, like a forum event handler, right? Handler dot ASPX page. When I send this request saying that localhost some 5190, right? A forum event handler.aspx page. When I send this request from the browser, right, this is something creates series of steps as web server, that is IAS, as part of application lifecycle. So one thing is, right, a unified, right, unified pipeline receives, right, the first request. So whatever request the user is sending from the browser, right, that request is received by a pipeline, and this pipeline request and the following events takes place, right? The first event is an object of the class application manager is created, right? One object is created, and secondly, an object of the class hosting environment is created, right? Environment created. So it is basically used to provide information regarding the resource. So third one is top level elements will get compiled, right? And fourth stage is response objects are created. Response objects are created, right? The application objects such as such as http context, right? http request, right? http response. These objects are going to create. So, and then next is an instance of http application object is created and assigned to the request. This is the last one. An instance of http application object is created and assigned to the request. So when you send this request, right, these are all the steps creating on web server as part of application lifecycle. So an object of the class application manager created, right? One class will get created for the resource. An object of the class, right? Like hosting an environment is creating for this particular request, so that it will give you the relevant information or resources from the server. And some of the top level elements will get compiled, whatever controls or tags you are keeping inside of that, or kind of http models or events, and kind of states as part of web server is going to compile. And then it will create a response objects like http context and http request and http response. These are the objects which by default creates when you send a request to the web server. See, these are all application side, but not yet getting to your page. So once you send the request, for the entire request is having these steps. But I'm not talking about this particular page. So we'll talk in the next level, that is a page life cycle, about the page ASP, not ASPX page. But when you send a request, this request will have a class, and that class manager, application manager, creating it. An object of class hosting environment is creating, right? For this particular request, it is going to create a hosting environment to provide the resource. And top level elements, whatever we have for this request, is going to compile it. And then objects will get create and assign it to this particular request. Okay, so the request is processed by the http application class. Different events are raised by this class for processing the request. When it comes to page lifecycle, right, this is what exact action is come into the picture when you send a request, or you are browsing from the browser to a web server. So when a page is requested, right, it is loaded into the server memory, right, and processed it and send it to the browser. That's how it is happening when you browse a request. When you browse a page, right, or when you send a page request, it is loading into the server memory. So when you send a request, it is loading into server memory, then process processed it, and then send the response back to browser. This is what the nature actually happening it, right? But uh, and then it is unloading from the memory, right? Finally it will get unloaded from the right memory once the page is processed. But each of these steps, right, so many methods and events are available and firing them, which could be overridden according to the need of the application. In other words, we can say you can write your own code to override the default code as well. Okay, the page class creates an hierarchical tree of all the controls on the page, right? Based on the controls you are having on the page, it is going to create an hierarchical tree. So all the components on the page, except the directives, as part of if you look at here in my ASPEX page, right? Except this particular directive section, right? Page directive. So for all these controls, right, the page class is going to create in a kind of hierarchical tree to process the right page. right? Let me share. Where is my screen? Okay. Come here. Okay. So you can see the control tree by adding a trace equal true in the config file anyway. So, and we will cover page directives and tracing under directives and event handling in the next coming sessions anyway. So the page lifecycle having different pages. The page lifecycle having different phases as like application lifecycle, right? So here one first thing is initialization. That means it is going to initialize your request, right? And then instantiation of the controls on the page. Instantiation of the controls on the page. As I said in earlier session, each control, each no component here in ASP.NET is a class. So if you wanted to access a class or render a class on the browser, you should have an instance for each and every component. So here every control is in a class for me, for a web server, and hence web server is going to instantiate for all controls, right? And then third one is restoration and maintenance of the state, right? Restoration and maintenance of, right, the state of a controls, right? And next one is execution of the event handler codes. Execution of the event handler code. And last one is page rendering, right? So these are the couple of phases, outer level phases I'm talking about. First, it will initialize, and then it instantiate each control object, and then it will restoration the state of each control, and then it start execution of event handles, and then it is going to render, right? And we can see other different stages of ASP.NET pages here, which actually firing behind the scene, right? One thing is page request. So when ASP.NET gets a page, right? So it decides whether to parse and compile a page, or there would be a cached version of the page. Accordingly, the response is going to send to the browser, right? When you request a page, so it is going to consider all these aspects, right? It will decide based on the configurations and the deployment you are having it. So whether it has to come from a virtual or a cache memory, or whether it has to compile our parts, or whether it comes from the browser, or whether it comes from the complete stuff from the web server, or all these kind of validations uh, taken place by the ASP.NET, right? And the next one is starting of a page life cycle. This is another step. So that means at this stage, the request and response objects are set. If the request is an old request or post back, the post back property of the page is set to true, and then the UI culture property of the page is also set, and finally it will assign all those steps for to start page life cycle. Okay, and then it goes to page initialization. So once everything is set, in this particular initialization stage, the controls on the page are assigned unique ID by setting the unique ID property, and then themes, if they are having it, it is going to apply it for a new request, like post back data is loaded and the control properties are represented to the use state values, etc., etc. All those things can be happen in this particular page initialization. And next one is page load. At this stage, control properties are set using the view state and control state values, etc., right? And next one is validations. So at this stage, validation method of the validation control is called, and its successful execution, the is valid property of the page is set to true. Okay, and then next is a postback. So in this, basically a postback, right? This is kind of event which actually looks for whether the page is freshly loaded or it is coming back from refresh or reload or submit. Based on that, it is going to execute the mentioned code. If the request is a postback, right, it is a old request, the related event handles will get invoked, right? And next one is page rendering. So in this stage, view state for page and the controls are saved. The page calls the render method of each control, and the output of rendering is right into the output stream, right? And that is how you are seeing the output. And last one is unload. So the rendered page is sent to the browser. The browser will get display that, such as a response and based on request. Then it will get unloaded and clean up done from the memory. Okay. So these are the different stages of ASP.NET. Different stages of ASP.NET. These are the life cycle phases. These are the ASP.NET stages. Okay, so when it comes to ASP.NET phase life cycle events, right, which basically we are thinking of it, right? We have a different kind of page life cycle events, right? At each stage of page life cycle, the page raises some events which could be coded, right? And an event handler is basically a function or subroutine or a procedure bound to the event using declarative attributes such as on click or handle, right? So when it comes to here list of page life cycle, right, ASP.NET page life cycle events. These are the events, right? The first one is pre-init, and this pre-init is the first event in the page lifecycle of ASPX page. It checks the is postback property and determine whether the page is postback or not. It sets the themes and master pages if they're having already, and then it creates dynamic controls and gets and sets profile property values. Okay, this event can be handled by overriding an on pre-init method or creating a page pre-init handler. Okay, and next one is init. So init event initializes the control property and the control tree is builder, right? This event can be handled by overloading the on init method or creating a page init. So this event, right, can be overwritten, right? Overwritten or overload using on pre-init, right, or page pre-init. And same way init, this event can be overload, right, using uh, on init or page init. And third one is init complete. So load local, I mean, whatever view states or postbacks, everything has been executed. And this init complete, this event allows no tracking of view states about all the controls turn on view state and the information updating from the client and server. Okay, and coming to the next one is load view state. Load view state event allows loading a view state information into the controls, right? And next one is load post data. This event occurs before the postback data is loaded into the controls. This event can be handled by overloading the on preload method or page preload handler. Okay, and the next one is preload. So again, as I said, it is going to fire before postback, right? And then next one is load. This is the page load. This event can be overriding using a page load. This event can be right overloading by overloading the onload method or creating a page load handler. Okay, and next one is load complete. So this load complete event process completed. No, I mean the loading process is completed. A control event handler or run, and page validation takes place. So this event can be handled by overloading the onload complete or page load complete. And next one is pre-render. Pre-render. This pre-render event occurs just before the output is rendered back to a browser. By handling this event, pages and controls can perform any updates before the output is rendered. Okay. The next one is a pre-render complete. Pre-render complete. So this particular pre-render complete, as the pre-render event is recursively fired for all child controls, this event ensures the compilation of the pre-rendering phases finish the rendering part. So and the next one is a save state complete. This is another event firing, which contains the state of your controls. So the state of control on the page is saved or not. It will basically save that page control state, personalization, and control state, and the view state information is saved. So the HTML markup is generated for all those saved content. So this stage can be handled by overloading the render method or creating page render handler. And once it is done, it will fire unload. So unload event basically, this is the last phase, is the last phase of the page lifecycle. It replaces or it raises the unload event for all controls recursively, and lastly for the page itself. So final cleanup is done, and all resources and control rendering markup and references, such as database connections, everything gets freed. So this event can be handled by modifying the onload event or creating page unload handler. Okay, so these are page lifecycle events. So these are page lifecycle events, and above are application lifecycle events. So basically, we have two cycles: ASP.NET lifecycle, application lifecycle, and page lifecycle. Application lifecycle basically concentrating the whole request, which will once the request is sent to server, it is going to create these kind of objects. Once it is done, so we will have different phases, and these are the events firing for each page: pre-init, init, init complete, load view state, load post data, preload, load, and load complete, right? um, and pre-render complete, save state complete, unload. This is the last event which is going to clear the created controls, references, data, and database connection strings. Everything gets freed up in this particular event. Okay, I hope you understand the ASP.NET lifecycle. So ASP.NET lifecycle basically having two life cycles: application lifecycle and page lifecycle. And we basically looking at page lifecycle events in the coming sessions, because how they are rendering and firing and loading of view state, and then how it is unloading. Okay, so and even you can see all the stuff even in your sample application here. This is something page load, right? You can create whatever events you wanted here of your page, right? And based on that events, it is going to fire the sequence of process. Okay, so thanks for listening this video, and I hope you understand the life cycle of ASP.NET, like application lifecycle and application or page lifecycle events, and how they are executing and behaving each and every method, and kind of levels it is having it, different phases like installation section and instantiation, restoration, and execution, and page rendering is the last one, where it is completely sending a response back to browser. And if at all having an HTML stuff, that is going to render and execute it to browser itself, and the complete response will get displayed in the browser. Okay, thanks for listening this video, and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.